see Worcester. I see rain has stopped playing. And metaphorically, that's what I want to do to this utterly dissembling, dishonest Prime Minister called David Cameron. From the very start, the so-called fabled renegotiation, which he promised us, do you remember, was legally binding, and we found out shortly afterwards that actually it could be struck down by the European Parliament, it could be struck down by the European judges. But if that wasn't dishonest enough, what he chose then to do was to use £10 million of your money to produce that leaflet which went through every house in the country telling us the benefits of staying part of this European Union. It shows he's a Prime Minister who could never ever appear on this ground and play with a straight bat. So I don't know what you've done with that leaflet, no, just... But I did, no, I booked an appointment and I bowled up Downing Street and I posted it straight back through his bloody door. And I recommend you send yours back too. But I think all of this maybe is having an effect. Some of you may have watched Prime Minister's Questions yesterday.
Yes.
When he was asked a question from an Exeter Member of Parliament about me. This tends to happen quite a lot in Prime Minister's Questions. And he said that the way I pronounced my name sounded rather poncy. Now, I won't go into the classical definition of what a ponce is, because it really would be fairly insulting. But it struck me. I must be getting under his skin, mustn't I? I must be getting under his skin. I've got a feeling that he and Samantha, before they go to bed every night now, stick pins in an effigy of me. And what a joke. I mean, how do you think that a home counties raised, Eton educated, upper middle class semi-aristocrat, what do you think he parks his car in? A garage? Of course he doesn't. He parks it in a garage. And that's why I call it Farage. So there we are. If we were in Bolton, they say Farage, and I haven't got a problem with that. But I think we maybe got him on the run. And the reason we're under his skin, you may have seen in the YouGov polling that was out this morning. Now, next week, next Thursday, May the 5th, is a pretty remarkable day in British politics. We have elections for the Scottish Parliament. We have elections for the Welsh Assembly. We have elections for the Northern Ireland Assembly. We have elections for the London Mayor and the London Assembly. We have a parliamentary by-election in Ogmore in West Wales. We have a parliamentary by-election in Sheffield Brightside. We also have nearly 2,600 English council seats that are being contested, and on top of that we have police and crime commissioners. And I'm pleased to tell you that not only is UKIP standing in 34 of those police and crime commissioner seats, but we're standing in 1,500 of the English council seats, and you are looking at the only party leader who next Friday and Saturday, when these results come through, will have won seats in all 4 of those regional parliaments. And that was backed up today by the YouGov poll, and when people were asked the question, how would you vote if there was a general election tomorrow, 20% said UKIP, and that is 6 million people. Not 4 million people, there's now 6 million people say they would vote UKIP in the general election tomorrow, and today's poll is the highest rating we've ever had for the UK. And I'm very pleased with that. So we're going to break through. We're going to win seats in Wales, London, Northern Ireland and Scotland. And that's going to be fun. Our lead candidate, who I think is almost guaranteed to get in Scotland, is a kilt-wearing Scot called David Coburn, and he's one of the very few people who, when I stand next to him, I feel like a quiet introvert. So Holyrood is in for one hell of a shock. It's going to be guinea a minute, better than going to the theatre. But I'm here tonight, especially to back and support Peter Jewell, who is standing for us in West Mercia. And I'm doing that because he's given me a tremendous level of help and support in terms of trying to raise money and to try and get this party into more of a professional shape. And I say that, not unashamedly, because UKIP sprung out from nowhere, didn't it? Yeah. It came up as a grassroots movement, full of enthusiasm, but now that we're by far the third biggest party in British politics, we've got to inject a bit of discipline, we've got to inject a bit of professionalism in what we do. And that is what people like Peter Jewell are doing and helping me make this a better party. There is no question, if you look at the candidates that are standing for Police and Crime Commissioner in West Mercia, Peter is head and shoulders above them, not just in terms of his frame, but in terms of his experience of life. And you've got the chance here to vote for a guy, you know, who's acted as a judge, who's been a magistrate, who knows something about the system, and he's up against people who, frankly, in terms of dealing with police and crime, are nobodies. And so I'm here to endorse Peter's candidacy and to ask you to please spread the message that the chap on the UKIP ticket could do this job and do it very, very well. So I will continue my whirlwind tour until next Thursday, and I'm going to go back to Northern Ireland and back to Scotland and back to Wales. And when we get UKIP voices in those assemblies, what it means is there will be more Eurosceptic voices in elected British politics. And that makes a difference for the event that will take place on June the 23rd. Some of you may have heard of it, it's a referendum. Now, where are we with this referendum? Well, what we've seen is a clubbing together of virtually every single international organisation and body. The OECD tell us we'll lose a month's salary. The International Monetary Fund tell us we'll be poorer. George Osborne, or Gideon, his real name, of course, but there we are. Now, the Chancellor, who has difficulty in predicting what the budget deficit will be in 3 weeks' time, has told us exactly where we'll be in 2030, namely impoverished. And Goldman Sachs tell us the same thing, as do JP Morgan, as do Siemens Engineering, as do endless retired European commissioners. It's as if the entire international, political, big banking and multinational class have clubbed together to try and threaten and bully the British people. It is absolutely shameful, but then they know. They know that opposition to this European project is growing right across the continent. I was in the Netherlands a month ago where they had a referendum on the extension of the EU to include the Ukraine, and the Dutch rejected it. The Danes had a referendum in December on whether they should opt in to the European arrest warrant, and they said no. So the international community knows that opposition in France and in Greece and in Spain and the Netherlands and Sweden and Finland and everywhere is growing, and their big fear is that if Britain votes for Brexit, we effectively will have knocked out the bottom brick in the wall and the rest will come tumbling down. You clap. I mean, this is supposed to be something dreadful. I'm told, Nigel, you could destroy the European Union. Well, when I look at all those grossly overpaid bureaucrats in Brussels and Luxembourg and Strasbourg and elsewhere, and when I think to myself that perhaps we better represent what Europe should be than the hijacking of the word Europe. Whoever voted for that flag? Whoever voted for that anthem? Whoever voted for that little scrawny bugger Van Rompuy? Who are you? I know. I'm sure they'll play a clip at my funeral. But the point I was making was a good one. The point I was making is that we in the West have always valued democracy. We in the West have believed that we should vote for governments that make our laws, and once every 5 years or so, have the opportunity to sack them and to replace them with somebody else with an entirely different manifesto. That is what parliamentary democracy is. It is something so fundamental. It is something so fundamental that those that went before us actually went to war to defend the very principle of independence. And of course, famously from this city, it was of course a battalion of the Worcester Regiment at Gallivelt in October 1914, who without their bayonet charge, Haig's First Army would have been captured and we would have lost the First World War. Sorry, I just couldn't resist that. I'm a very keen military historian, and for those that don't know, do go and look it up. But what the Worcesters did at Gallivelt genuinely was the action that stopped us from losing World War I. The point I'm making is we believe in democracy. And as members of this European Union, we cannot call ourselves a democracy, and here's why. Let's say in a sovereign, independent Britain, we had Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister in 2020. Now, this is looking increasingly unlikely, and the chances of Ken Livingstone being his Chancellor are taken today. Can you imagine if a UKIP MEP or a UKIP councillor had made those appalling comments about Hitler and the Jews? Can you imagine what the hue and cry would have been? And yet they've tried, haven't they, to brush it under the carpet until it's got to such a level where Corbyn's had to act. But let's just imagine for a moment that Corbyn became our Prime Minister, that Corbyn enacted a whole loopy set of laws, that he brought back the hate taxes from the 1970s, that we saw the rich and successful flee the country, that he turned Britain into a place where nobody foreign wanted to invest, and that it was a genuine disaster. I would rather have a Corbyn disaster for 5 years and the opportunity at the end of that 5 years to get rid of Mr. Corbyn and to replace him with somebody else who undid everything that had been done. I would rather 5 years of Mr. Corbyn than to live under a system where all the legislation that affects my fishing industry, my farming industry, my steel industry, my employment regulation, my healthy and safe at work rules, my environmental rules. There is nothing, once a European law has been made, whether it's a good law or a bad law, once a European law is made, there is nothing we can do as the electorate, as a parliament, or as a British government to change one dot or comma of it. We have found ourselves lied to 40 years ago, being told it was all about trade and not to worry our little heads, and we found ourselves now in a political union that makes 75% of our laws that we cannot change. Effectively, when you add to that the fact that the European Court of Justice can strike down acts of Parliament and overrule any decision from our own Supreme Court, and when you add to that the fact that we as a sovereign nation, or used to be a sovereign nation, have lost our ability to control our borders, and when I hear the Prime Minister and Theresa May, the worst Home Secretary in living history when it comes to border controls, when I hear her telling us, no, we have border controls. Well, I'm sorry, I've just come through the airport in Birmingham. I mean, that's my passport. You've all got one of those. What are the first two words on it? European Union. We are now citizens of a new legal entity. It's moved a long way, has it not, from the common market back in the 1970s. That passport is now effectively available to 508 million people. Any one of those 508 million people is entitled to come and live in this country with exactly the same rights that we have. And we now have net migration into Britain running at 10 times the post-war average. This is not about being against anybody. It's not about being nasty. It's about saying that a normal country controls its borders. A normal country decides who can come and live in it. And a normal country with a good government says that its first duty is to put the interests of its own people first. If you add up all of those things, effectively, what our political class have done to us is to give away our country. Yes. They've given away our history. They've attempted to give away our future. And that is why this vote that we have on June the 23rd will without doubt be the most important and the most significant vote any of you will have in your lifetimes. And to beat the establishment, and to beat Goldman Sachs, and to beat Siemens Engineering, and to beat Lord Mandelson. All right, Tony Blair. To beat these people, we have got to build a people's army of ordinary folk in this country who are prepared to put their shoulder to the wheel, to persuade their friends, their families, people in their local golf club, bridge club, women's institute, wherever it is that you may go. And goodness me, I'm doing my bit. Not just speaking at these meetings, I'm touring pubs endlessly. Well, it's true. This referendum really matters, and Peter's right. If it hadn't been for us as a UKIP being prepared to take years of abuse, it would never have happened. I am delighted that there are 6 cabinet ministers from the Conservative Party now on our side, and I shared a platform with Chris Grayling in Stoke-on-Trent just the other day. And I'm pleased there are people like Mick Cash, who runs the RMT, and some Labour MPs, including the magnificent Kate Hoey, who I've shared platforms with all over the country. So there are political figures involved in this, and there are business figures involved in this, but ultimately this is going to be the people's campaign. And I urge all of you in this room who think, feel and understand as I do about our country, about what it should be, about what it could be as a self-governing, independent nation that perhaps gets back a bit of its pride and self-respect. Because I find it absolutely shaming to see British ministers, heads of county councils, even the Prime Minister, going to Brussels and begging, please sir, can we have some of our own money back? Yeah. I mean, is that what we as a great nation have sunk to? And to think that the British Prime Minister, or Dave, as he likes to be, Dodgy Dave, I like that, yeah. But Dave, as he likes to be called, went to a European summit 3 months ago and came back and said he'd won a great victory. Do you remember? We would be able, no, not the deal, the next summit. We would be able, because he had agreed with 27 other heads of state, that we could remove value-added tax on tampons. now presented by the Prime Minister, who, despite all of these things, is the Prime Minister of the 5th biggest economy in the world, the 4th largest trading nation in the world, the country that actually developed that very concept of parliamentary democracy, the country that is the head of an organisation that has within it 53 countries and 2.3 billion people. And by the way, once we've left the European Union, I want us to re-embrace our friends around the world in the Commonwealth. But no, our Prime Minister claims victory because a few other heads of government and a few bureaucrats are allowing us to remove VAT on tampons. I'm not sure whether to laugh or to cry. Because if you think about it, I repeat the point, is that what we as a nation have sunk to? I don't believe we have. I believe in Britain, I believe in the British people. I believe in our ability not to get everything right, but to get a lot more right for ourselves than foreign bureaucrats will do for our fishing industries and our farming industries and our small businesses and our steel industries, and certainly in terms of control of our borders. I've put 20 years of my life into this because I do believe it is the single most important question we will face in our lifetimes, and we have in 57 days the chance to change the future of history. It's a journey that I am completely dedicated to, and I ask you and I invite you to come with me on that journey. Thank you. You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.